I'll let you know. It's just loading. Uno momento. You're up.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, April 21st. Just before I call the meeting to order, I did want to take a moment to send out our most heartfelt condolences to all the folks in Nova Scotia, our friends and neighbors down there that are going through such just horrible situation while trying to deal with COVID. I can't imagine what that's like, and know that you have our deepest sympathies here, all of the family and friends of those who were slain, and particularly wanted to send our deepest sympathies to the family of the slain Constable Heidi Stevenson, and send a really meaningful, resolute message to all of the police officers, law enforcement officers across the country. Thank you for doing what you do all the time, putting yourselves in harm's way to help protect the rest of us. So thank you to the RCMP and other police officers. With that, I will call to order the meeting. Looking to the agenda, are there any changes or additions?
None from administration, Mayor Borman.
In which case I'll move the agenda be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We'll move on to item B1, the delegation of the Biosphere Institute here to talk with us about the Canmore Community Solar Project. Ms. Hodnowski. Cheryl.
Hi. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. For those counselors who don't know me, my name is Cheryl Hodnowski, and I'm the director of the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley. I'm also joined today by Jody Conwell, who coordinates the climate change and environmental sustainability programs at the Biosphere Institute. I do have some pretty loud landscaping happening outside my window, so if you can't hear me at any time, please just like somebody, John, if you could raise your hand, maybe I can see you. But I'm going to talk about our Canmore Community Solar Project, which ran from April of 2019 to February 2020. We are building on the results of this project, and we would love to hear counselors' questions and your feedback about how you'd like to see this effort continue to develop. So before I dive in, before I dive in, I would like to just acknowledge our project partners. So this project was funded by Energy Efficiency Alberta and the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association, KCP Energy, and ISL Engineering helped us with project implementation. Every step of this project was also coordinated with staff from the town of Canmore. So the goal of Canmore Community Solar was to understand the feasibility of creating a so-called community renewable energy generation project in or near Canmore with a specific focus on solar energy. So what is community renewable energy generation? I admit I knew very little about this topic before we started working on it. So community generation projects produce renewable energy locally, and they are fully or partly owned by local community members. So for example, there's a wind farm in Dardesheim, Germany, where they started installing wind turbines in the early 90s. They've now installed 31 wind turbines, and 90% of the residents of Dardesheim have bought shares in the project. The entire wind farm is funded by local residents who share the profits from that electricity generation. In Canmore as well, the examples of community generation are growing. There are about 30 community-based cooperatives in Canada today. Sorry, in Canada, example, community generation is growing, and in Canmore. There are about 30 community-based cooperatives in Canada today that are managing renewable energy projects. These projects empower citizens to contribute directly to renewable energy generation, even if they can't install solar panels on their own homes. They have the potential to change the way our electricity is controlled because they provide you with the option to purchase electricity from a community-based cooperative rather than a large utility retailer. They create local investment revenue, and they build social acceptance of renewable energy, which is critical for our transition to a low carbon future. And there are really, when you boil it down, there are two main components that you need for a community generation project to work. And the first is a viable project site, and the second is community-based financing. And so Canmore Community Solar assessed whether both of these components could work here in Canmore. And when we thought about project sites, we thought, okay, Canmore doesn't have like a large field where we can put in a giant solar installation. So how do we utilize built space in Canmore? And that led us to thinking of rooftop solar. And so the first scenario we thought about for a viable project site was, can we create a community solar project that looks like a network of solar panels on residential rooftops throughout our town, where a community-based cooperative pays homeowners to rent their rooftop space, installs solar panels on those rooftops, and that electricity is fed into the grid and the profits come back to members of a community cooperative. The second scenario we looked at was similar, but it was commercial rooftops. So looking at solar on commercial properties. And then finally, we looked at a third scenario that was other opportunities outside of the town of Canmore, but still here in the Bow Valley, where we might be able to put in a solar installation. And then on the financing front, we asked whether or not we might be able to create a opportunity development cooperative here in Canmore, which is the preferred method to finance community generation projects. And so I'll talk quickly first about those three scenarios for a project site. So with that residential rooftop scenario, the first thing we did was we reviewed a University of Calgary report called Rooftop Solar in Canmore, which ranked neighborhoods in Canmore based on their solar potential. And those neighborhoods on this map that are darker in color have higher solar potential. So in the top 10 neighborhoods, we went door to door. This is a beautiful Karen Messenger. And we knocked on doors and we asked residents, would you like to rent your rooftop out for a community solar project? And we told them about the project. We also did general outreach to all Canmore residents. Jody gave several public presentations. She gave interviews on the radio and in the newspaper. And we reached out over our social media networks, and we asked people to email us or to visit our website if they thought they might be interested in renting out their roof for community solar. All of this outreach was done over a short period, 2 to 3 weeks, in May and June of 2019. The goal was just to see if we had enough residents who might be interested for this to be a viable option. And for those rooftops where people said they were interested, KCP Energy undertook an assessment where they looked at how many solar panels could be fit on that rooftop, how much electricity could be generated, how would it connect to the grid, and what might it cost in general. So for that scenario, we had amazing response from the community. In just that 2 to 3 week period, we had 147 homeowners and 7 condominiums say, yeah, we would be interested if this were an option. We actually only had the capacity to do assessments for 100, so we ended up having to make a wait list. But on the flip side, we also took a deep dive into provincial regulations, and we found that this option is not financially viable under current provincial regulations. Those regulations are still being developed, so we don't know what the future will hold. We also had 2 other scenarios to look at. So for commercial rooftops, we identified the 25 largest commercial properties in Canmore, which cumulatively represent 10% of the overall building area in town. Now, as some of you are probably thinking, some of those buildings are owned by the town of Canmore. Other ones are schools. But for other commercial properties, we did the same kind of outreach. We called up those property owners and we asked them if they might be interested in renting out their rooftops for a community solar project. For those that said yes, KCP Energy once again undertook an assessment of how many panels could be fit on a roof, how much electricity generated, how it would connect to the grid. And ISL Engineering did structural assessments of whether or not those roofs would be able to support the weight of solar panels. We had 9 commercial property owners tell us that they would be interested. It's a bit more of a complicated process with these guys because not all of these properties are even owned locally, but we're continuing these conversations. We've had we've had good response. And this option does better on the financial feasibility front. So there's a couple of routes for it to be viable. First, if we have an aggregation of commercial buildings in Canmore, for example, the Grizzly Paw Brewery, Shops at Canmore, and the Coast Hotel, and they all want to put solar panels on their roofs for a community solar project, those panels could all be connected to the grid through 1 meter, and the electricity sold to the grid, and the profits come back to members of a community cooperative. The other option is that if a building is big enough, we can put an installation on that building, and the electricity generated can be purchased by the building owner themselves from a community cooperative. So this is a good scenario. And we also had this scenario 3, which I'm now realizing is misspelled on that slide. Sorry, guys. But anyway, so this was the smallest part of the project. We had fewer resources for this scenario. We really wanted to focus within Canmore. But we looked at opportunities still here in the Bow Valley, but outside of town, where we might find a larger property and see if you could put in a bigger solar installation. We did have 3 property owners tell us that they were interested, and KCP Energy once again did that assessment of potential for solar panel installation and electricity generation in those properties, and we're continuing conversations with these folks. And this is a very financially viable option. So the Biosphere Institute continues to work on scenarios 2 and 3, as commercial properties and other options outside of Canmore. On the scenario 1 with the residential property, even though it's not financially viable right now, the really good thing we had was we had really high community interest. And that is a really good sign for the second piece of the project, which is the community financing piece. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So at the same time that we went door to door and did this general outreach asking residents if they would be interested in renting out their rooftops, we also asked them if they would be interested in investing in a community renewable generation project. This was a very quick and dirty assessment, only over a 2-week period. And the goal was not to figure out the total number of people in Canmore who might invest. It was to ask, are there enough people who might be interested? And once we kind of hit that threshold, then we said, okay, this would be a viable thing. So we had 109 people tell us, yeah, we'd be interested. That was a good result. We also reached out to the community and asked if there were community members who would be interested in joining a steering committee for a future opportunity development cooperative that would manage a community renewable energy project. We recruited community members over about a 2-month period to try to gain a broad skill set. And for those folks who are interested, the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association provided training in how to create a cooperative, how to raise capital, what is the role of local investment in community generation, and so on. The members of this steering committee have been meeting at minimum once every 2 weeks since July. They now meet once a week. There's 1 representative from the Biosphere Institute, which is Jody, and then 5 very dedicated community volunteers. A couple of these folks have put hundreds of hours into this project already, and it has been very exciting for us at the Biosphere to be able to give people the opportunity to do something they're really excited about. These folks have now created Bow Valley Green Energy, and they have filed the incorporation paperwork to create the Bow Valley's first community-based renewable energy cooperative, Bow Valley Green Energy. They're continuing to develop the details related to potential projects for scenarios 2 and 3. They're also working on their internal strategic planning, business and financial planning, and the Biosphere is working closely with the cooperative on aspects related to community education and communications around community generation and on how to develop a strategy for membership drive. I just want to emphasize this is entirely community-led at this point, which is really exciting. And we're seeing from practitioners around the world who are working on conservation and on climate change that the projects that have the best chance for impact long-term are those that we're doing hand in hand with our local community members. So this has been a really exciting way for the Biosphere to build off of our education and outreach programs to that point of allowing community members to lead. It's been awesome. And I'll just close with a couple of bigger picture thoughts about, I think, why these kind of projects are important, even in a time of COVID-19. So obviously we're trying to help the town of Canmore with emissions reductions as consistent with its climate action plan. I think this kind of project is a great example of the bang for its buck that the town gets from investing in organizations like the Biosphere Institute. Without core funding from the town, we just wouldn't have had the staff time to think up this project or to fundraise for it and to get support from Energy Efficiency Alberta. And even though we had funding for implementation from Energy Efficiency Alberta, every step of the project was coordinated with the town to help the town meet its environmental goals. In general, for every $1 that the town invests in the Biosphere's core, we're able to raise another $5 or $6 for projects to do here in the town of Canmore. The other thing is, this type of investment for community members, if we get these kind of projects off the ground, is a pretty safe investment. It has minimal fluctuation. If the sun is shining, they can still get a return. And bigger picture, I think a lot of us are reading in the news these days that scientists have been warning for years about a pandemic like COVID-19 and asking us to be prepared. And they're asking us to be prepared on climate change and biodiversity issues as well in that same way, and telling us that if we take action now, we'll avoid the most negative consequences in the future. And these are exactly the things that the Biosphere is working on. And again, that approach of having the opportunity to empower our community to lead, we feel is a really impactful one, and one that conservation practitioners are learning everywhere. So we're really excited to have had the opportunity to talk to you about this today. And with that, we'll ask for any questions and feedback, and feel free to ask detailed questions. Jody is our resident expert on all the details, so don't hold back.
Great, thanks very much for the presentation. And on that note, I'll start off with what may be a detailed question. So earlier in your presentation, you referenced the fact that we had a really strong commitment from individual homeowners and condo owners, 150 or more. But you noted that approach isn't financially feasible. I think you said under current provincial regulations. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I'll start the answer, and then Jody, you can jump in if I get anything wrong here. But the provincial regulations for this basically require that every solar installation under a community generation project must be connected to the grid separately through a particular meter. And there has to be an assessment for every installation as well. So there's not a way to take a network of dispersed rooftop solar installations and connect them all to the grid through one meter. If you have to connect them through separate meters, it gets very expensive very fast. Not just the cost of the meter, but the cost of the assessment, which is being done for each rooftop rather than for a whole community rooftop system. And then Jody, do you have more details to provide on that? Or John, does that fully answer your question?
If Jody has some other details, I'd be happy to hear them.
I think that was a pretty succinct answer as to the reasons why. It's the dispersal of the properties that's the problem. In order to connect to the grid, you do have to fall under one of two sets of regulations, and they have stipulations on how to connect and the process that you go through in order to do that. And those things are also regulated by the energy providers. So there's not much we can do to change those things at this time.
Okay. Thank you. So it would seem on the surface, on the face of it, that what you've been working on planning for Canmore would fit anywhere in any community. So do you know if the province is actively working on changing the regulations to allow for that kind of individual connection?
Yeah, so I don't think we know the latest updates. We did meet with MLA Rosen in the fall, and she sent a letter on our behalf to the Committee on Red Tape Reduction and to the ministry. Jody, can you correct me if I'm wrong about that? And we also sent a letter with her support. The regulations are under development, so they do have the chance for revision. It's just a question of when the provincial government gets to them. A lot of the regulations around community generation were made with the idea that there would be a giant solar installation in a field, and it would all connect through one meter. And so they haven't thought of these other opportunities, but We agree with you. I mean, there's so much opportunity for rooftop solar in every community that it would be great to see a change. I mean, I think a good takeaway is that there still are good options for us here on commercial properties, and there are some property owners very near Canmore who are also interested. So there's still a way forward.
And that's quite encouraging. If the province is actually in the process of amending their regulations, then, I mean, that's good to know. Never hurts for municipalities to advocate on these issues and try to push things along, although our experience typically has been we haven't had much success in getting the province to push along on their regulations. But in this context, every year in the fall, presumably it'll happen this year, there's the AUMA conference, Alberta Urban Municipalities Association conference, where individual communities will bring, put on the table various motions of directing the AUMA board to try to work in some way with the province. And this is, sounds to me like something that we would get a lot of traction if there was value in moving forward with something like that. It'd be something that we'd see, I'm certain, 100% support from the other municipalities. But if the province is actively working on the regulations, then I don't know if there's a need to go to that level. But if you get a sense that it's not happening in Edmonton, then maybe we should have another discussion.
Yeah, that would be great to talk about with you. I mean, I don't think we know if they're actively working on them right now, especially given everything that's going on. It was, as far as I understand, it was something that was it was something that was not completed under the NDP government. So it's something that would be reviewed and should have been kind of revised and completed at some point in the future. So I think that could have value, and we'd be happy to share more information with you and copies of the letters that we've sent as well.
Sure, if you want to keep us in sort of in the loop on how those conversations go with the province and with the MLA, then we might be able to take that on.
Okay.
Are there questions from other members of council? Councillor Comfort?
So my question is, there doesn't seem to be much appetite at the provincial level to support anything energy-wise that isn't oil and gas. Would you expect that this would receive support at the provincial level?
Do you mean funding support?
In any regard, morally, philosophically, process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So Jody actually, I came back from vacation in August, and Jody was like, I think we should meet with MLA Rosen. And I thought, oh my goodness, how's this gonna go? And it went great. She loved this project. She was very engaged. She was really excited. And she told us that she loved it because it was coming from the community, and it represented a community-based effort and was being driven by community members. I think it's an easy win for a representative of either party from that perspective. We don't see, so when we originally received funding from Energy Efficiency Alberta, that was under the previous government, and they had initially envisioned a second phase for this program where they would provide funding to assess the feasibility and then provide funding to actually help you get a project off the ground. That phase isn't happening, but the Biosphere Institute is actively pursuing options for other support. So the Banff Canmore Community Foundation has given us a pretty generous donation. We've applied for a federal program in social finance, and we're expecting to get the results of that in May. So we're looking for other options to get things off the ground. Jody, do you have anything to add on that?
Nope, I think that covers it.
I don't think we're going to see the provincial government stopping it. And I suspect that it would be a great advertising piece for our local representative to say, look at what this community has done in terms of diversifying energy generation. We just may not get financial support on that front.
Okay, well, that's great. Thanks, Cheryl. And just a last thought or last question. So the next steps, what can we expect to see happening? Forget COVID if you can, in the optimistic world. The Bow Valley Green Energy Cooperative is waiting to get their incorporation. There's 9 commercial properties signed up. There's a number of interested investors. So is it reasonable to assume that once all of the I's are dotted and T's crossed with the incorporation, that a project will begin to move forward?
I'm going to let Jody answer that question because I know the original goal was to get to break ground on something by the end of 2020, but I'm not sure where the cooperative might be now. So go ahead, Jody.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say timelines are probably pushed back. We also have to be aware that people's personal financial situations are very different to how they were when we were asking these questions. So as a cooperative, we're being very cautious about that. So we're kind of working in the background to line everything up so that once these things are ready, once the COVID situation is over and people's lives begin to get back to normal, we can start moving on things relatively rapidly. We have things to do still, like research. As Cheryl mentioned, that was a very quick analysis of the community. We want to really spread the net and determine, how much money could we feasibly garner from investment in the community? How much would people be interested in investing? Would we need 5 investors or 100? And so we've got lots of questions still to answer. But we're definitely working at putting all the pieces together so that once we can move rapidly.
And I would add as well, the federal grant that we've applied for, if we are successful, that grant includes support to hire consultants to help us through a business plan, financial modeling for different scenarios, and for 3 top priority projects to do a detailed financial model of costs and returns for 3 priority projects. And it would help us to hire a lawyer to set up the structure for investment shares and offering memorandums. So if that funding comes through, we'll start moving forward on that by the summer.
Great. There are no other questions from councillors. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you for your presentation, ladies. I just, firstly, I wanted to comment, the group is meeting weekly. That's very, very impressive for a volunteer group. They're clearly very passionate about the work that they're doing. So I just want to thank them from afar. Secondly, when you, in your presentation, you spoke about, you had about 100 people that were interested in investing. Did you throw out a number as to what that initial investment would look like? Did they know, was it $5, $500, $1,000?
No, there was no value dollar amount associated with that. It was just we basically just asked the question, is this something that you would be interested in, in investing? And that's kind of one of the things that we're working on now, is trying to work out what those balances are with finances. Is it $100? Is it $1,000? Is it 10?
Right.
And those are the kind of questions we're trying to find out now.
Perfect. All right.
If I understand correctly, Jody, there will be multiple investment levels types options. So there will be there'll be a membership fee to join the cooperative, which would be low, and then investment shares in a project. There may be different options for people in terms of what those would cost. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the membership is a requirement of the cooperative in the way that the structure works. So we want as many people to become members as possible. So as Cheryl said, that would be low, likely to be in the $100 range. And then we'd be looking at selling investment shares for somewhere in the region of $500 to $1,000. Again, these are just sort of high level numbers at the moment. But you can buy more than one share. So we're trying to make it accessible to as many people as possible.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Councillor Comfort.
I just wondered, is this based on a model that's been successful elsewhere? Is another project or that's similar or another jurisdiction?
I'm going to let Jody answer that because she's done a bunch of work looking into other models nationally and internationally. So. Yeah,
so it definitely was part of this project, was looking at the viability of these kind of things elsewhere. It's relatively new to Canada, Alberta specifically. There's lots of cooperatives operating in Ontario right now doing exactly this. There's also lots of these cooperatives doing very similar things in Europe. So some of them have been operating for 20 plus years. So I think that shows that this is a viable opportunity that we should be jumping on.
And there was one cooperative that you were in touch with in Ontario, right, that wants to help us here.
Yes, that's correct. They're interested in helping us get our first project off the ground with financial and financial support and also advice as well. So it's all about community.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to have to move the agenda along, but I thank you both very much for being here. I think it's a really interesting project, and I'm very excited about the potential, and kudos to the Biosphere for taking this on and working to move it forward. I'm certain that we'll find real success with this in Canmore over time. So again, thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Time I'll move on then to the minutes for approval. Are there errors or omissions? This is the minutes of the Tuesday, March 17th Committee of the Whole. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving into item D1, a verbal report on the pandemic update. Ms. DeSoto.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Borrowman. Members of council, I'll be giving the update today just really from the Emergency Coordination Center, which again is the ECC. I know you have a full afternoon, so I will try to be brief. The ECC continues to meet regularly. We've shifted our meetings just starting this week to every other day. We had been meeting daily. But we are monitoring the daily briefings from the medical officer of health and are determining our actions needed to respond to the COVID-19 health emergency. I can report, if you haven't seen recently, that the number of active COVID-19 cases in our area, the geographical region from the province's reporting map, has been on a steady decline over the last week or so. So we now sit at having 2 active cases in our community, with 13 people having fully recovered and no reported cases having to be treated in hospital. So that is relatively good news, but we still are maintaining our state of local emergency. And as I advised in our last briefing, it's our intent to keep that state of local emergency in effect until the extraordinary measures that we've put in place are no longer necessary. And those measures are things like our facility closures, the additional supports we're offering to businesses and residents, and the big closure of many of our businesses and tourist economy. The Emergency Social Services is a team that's separate from the ECC, mostly comprised of FCSS staff, but also some of our recreation staff. And they continue to work on assessing community needs and the supports that are required. Their main opportunity to do that has been through the call center that we established almost right away. The call center is starting to see the volume of calls and inquiries declining. So they're going to evaluate their ongoing purpose and the best way to continue to evaluate and assess the needs of the community. As of yesterday, they've had a total of 358 inquiries, and they'll be reporting to us in the coming days on the trends and the types of inquiries that they've received. I do want to take time, though, to acknowledge that I know there is some concern in the community regarding potential or perceived volume of visitor traffic that may come to the community, especially as the warm weather starts to come. And I know there's been some calls for us to put those traffic stops in place, or potentially even some blockades. So the ECC has not taken this decision or this action at this time, and that decision has been reviewed and considered very carefully. But there's a number of reasons why we didn't think it appropriate in Canmore, including the complexity of our geography and the number of resources it would take to monitor all the entrances to the community, and the fact that Canmore acts as a regional service hub for Bow Valley residents, be they in the MD of Bighorn or in the town of Banff even, or Lake Louise. So many people travel here for work and to access their essential services. And we do have a very active construction sector that is still ongoing. But I do want to assure council and certainly assure residents that the health and safety of the community is the primary concern of the ECC. It's our top priority, and we continue to monitor our outdoor spaces for compliance with the public health orders. And we will take action if there are some violations in those health orders, specifically around the number of people's gathering together and the requirements for physical distancing. One action that we have taken through consultation with the Arts and Events Department and their team is to cancel all events and bookings in our parks and streets through to the end of June. And we're putting a decision-making matrix together. Our recreation staff who are left are looking at a guide that will guide our decisions for our access to and use of our outdoor recreation amenities that like playing fields and tennis courts. And this will include a decision-making process for further closures if necessary. So we're in the process of finalizing that. And certainly, like many other communities, I've listened to briefings from Calgary and Edmonton. We continue to look to the Provincial Medical Officer of Health for direction on some of these things. And I do understand that she is preparing to provide some further information in the coming days regarding the appropriate and safe use of outdoor amenities. I can share this past weekend, as typical, that the RCMP and our bylaw staff were doing their regular patrols, and they have reported that their observance is general compliance with the public health orders. And that was the case even on the beautiful weather day that we had on Sunday. And certainly one of the things I noticed in my own neighborhood of Larch is the sheer number of people getting out and enjoying the weather. I think the tendency may be to think that those are visitors, but certainly my experience has been that many of them are my neighbors. With all of the other recreational amenities and businesses closed, people are they're here, they're in town, they're not traveling, they're not accessing the back country or going to their local restaurants or shopping on Main Street. So Canmore residents, being Canmore residents, want to get outside. They're walking, biking, they're having driveway visits with their neighbors, and we continue to encourage them to do that safely, to respect the public health orders, and to stay in their own neighborhood. And I want to acknowledge Mayor Borrellman's assistance in this work. He and together with Mayor Sorensen, they've been doing many media interviews in the city to emphasize the message that now is not the time to visit the mountains. That messaging has been amplified by other jurisdictions as well. Mayor Nenshi, for example, has amplified that message, as has Dr. Hinshaw. And we believe it's actually having some really good effect. As evidence of that, I was able to get some data off the province's open data site for vehicle counts on the Trans-Canada Highway. There are a number of locations along the highway that you can get count data from. And for the last weekend of March, there's no data for April yet, but the last weekend of March, the traffic count data is only a third of the typical weekend in March of 2019. So we do believe that many of our regional visitors are taking that message to heart and are modifying their actions accordingly. And we will continue to monitor and modify our actions as needed. So really that is the end of the ECC briefing I wanted to give you today. Later this afternoon at the Finance Committee meeting, we'll be giving you a full update on the actions we've taken from a budgetary perspective. But if there are any questions at this point of me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councillor Comfort.
Thank you, Mayor Borrellman. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. DeSoto. I have a question about, you said public events are canceled until the end of June. So that begs the question, July 1st, I would assume, is part of the kind of universal cancellation, or will there be a formal decision later on about what we'll do for July 1st celebrations?
There will be a formal decision later on. We have been working jointly and regionally with Banff and the City of Calgary on that. And I think we're getting close to an announcement on that. There are other options as well that we're investigating through more neighborhood and virtual opportunities. So we'll be prepared to make an announcement on that pretty soon, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think we can expect some really creative ideas coming forward from our great team at Arts and Special Events. I have no doubt they're cooking up some delightful ideas. So, Councillor McCallum, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, Ms. DeSoto, for your briefing. I was wondering, you speak that we're in constant contact or in daily contact with the Provincial Medical Director's Office of Health. I don't think I got that name right, by the way. But have they at any point instructed us that we should barricade our entrances to town, or that we should limit people in any way from entering town?
No, they have not gone as far as to say that there should be restrictions. They have amplified the messaging that Mayor Borrellman and
Yes.
Mayor Sorensen have been putting out, and saying now is not the time to travel to a vacation or just as day trippers, to stay in your own neighborhood. But no, they have not made any formal direction regarding travel from one community to another. And it's
Right.
certainly not just our own community. I was reading a news report this morning that various neighborhoods of Calgary, if you live along the river in Calgary, you don't want, your neighbors from the north or south to come down to the river to recreate. So these kinds of things are just growing in concern across the province and the country, I imagine.
I got a call today actually from a mayor from another tourist community in Alberta with the same questions as to how we're handling it. So, and so I just wanted to confirm that we are not defying any orders from the Public Health Authority, that we are implementing every recommendation that they are providing us, as well as every order that they're providing us daily.
Yes.
Okay. Just we're working within our authority and everything else, and listening to the authority, which is what I understand it to be. I just wanted to confirm that publicly.
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Thank you very kindly.
And to that point, and to echo what the CAO said, I was on a teleconference call with a number of ministers and elected officials from across the province yesterday evening, and Dr. Hinshaw, of course, was on the conference, and she indicated that it appears that outdoor transmission may be less of a risk than initially thought. And she suggested that she was doing what she referred to as a rapid review, and it might be that within a week there'll be some more details on that possibility. So I think that's something I'm looking forward to seeing, and may inform this broader conversation. Are there other questions for Ms. DeSoto? Seeing none, thanks for giving that report.
Thank you.
At this point, then we'll move on to item D2, the 2019 RCMP and Bylaw Annual Report and Statistics. And who's coming up first? Staff Sergeant Andronic? Mr. Burt, who's coming along first?
I'm here. Stan's online. Can you hear me?
Okay, you bet. Staff Sergeant Andronic, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I am holding my phone here, so I don't know if that's going to make it go in and out, but thank you for having me today. Hello, Mayor Burrowman, Councillor, Administration, everyone online. Before I start with our annual report, I did just want to touch base on obviously some current events here, and I just wanted to talk about, number one, how there's been a lot of kindness shown by the community to our detachments and our members, and this is really appreciated by our members. Someone painted a rock with the word hope on it and left it outside our back door, so all the members see that coming in and out. Yesterday we had flowers left put at our flagpole. I believe that's in reference to our fallen member in the east. We received a lot of community condolences for the incident in Nova Scotia, and I would add that our members, and we're all thinking of everyone involved in that incident, not just our member, but all involved. And from our point, we do encourage the community to stay strong and continue to follow the public health rules for the safety of themselves, but also to remember the first responders, especially the healthcare workers. They're carrying a major load on this one, and I know some people may forget that. They see the nice weather and they may feel the threat to them isn't so bad, but there's still there's a lot of people out there that are working quite hard to keep the community safe. So to keep that in mind. Thanks for humoring me with that. Getting to our annual report, I know everyone has a copy of it. Crime reduction, talking about preventing and reducing property crime. The numbers all went down last year, and that's in line with numbers from across the Southern Alberta District. Property crime was down 9%, frauds were down 17%, theft of motor vehicle was down 18%. Crime reduction efforts have been in play, targeted patrols, proactive enforcement, and street checks, detecting crime, and also laying the charges when the chance is there. It is safe to say that the majority of crimes are done by a small amount of people, and there has been a lot of regional effort by district crime reduction units to make arrests. And when people are in custody, there's just not as much crime out there. So there's credit to go around the whole Southern Alberta District to try to get more of the prolific offenders off the streets. And how long they're off the street, well, I could talk about that another time, but crime does slow down when certain criminals are arrested and charged. So there is some great crime reduction efforts going on around the district. Talking about organized crime, we tend to go straight to drug files, but I will say that a lot of the property crime is related to organized crime as well. But when we talk about drug files, our numbers were down significantly this year, as you would see, including trafficking and possession. We didn't have as many large projects this year. We can't just do them every year, and we had some high numbers in the past year because of a large-scale project we did. But also the legalization of cannabis, I think it's safe to say that it's one of the more detectable drugs. You can smell it quite easily, and that really contributes to the beginning of a lot of drug investigations. So with cannabis being legal, it's not an automatic offense to have it. So it's not, people aren't being arrested for the possession of it right away. So it's safe to say that that's probably contributed to less arrests. But still, there is drug enforcement work being done out there. Traffic safety, as you can see, criminal code offenses increased by quite a large number, 39%. Mainly impaired driving, but criminal code driving offenses do include drive while prohibited, failed to remain, criminal code offenses, dangerous driving, but mainly impaireds. And provincial traffic offenses were up 15%. We did use some of our enhanced money from the town. We did do some enhanced shifts more specific for traffic safety. We identified some problem areas and some traffic issues. And members working those shifts focused mainly on offenses such as distracted driving, intersection enforcement, and speed enforcement. I think having these members out on the street doing traffic does help our crime reduction as well, because there's more people on the street, there's more members on the street, the police cars are out there, the lights are on. It's a deterrent. To see members out there is the first deterrent to crime. And the impaired files, our members did take an active role in doing more self-generated impaired driving enforcement, and I think that's indicative of the numbers. Employee wellness is also a priority of ours. It has been for a number of years now. I'm seeing good morale in the detachment. It's always nice to say that, and we hope for that as a leader of the building, but there's a lot of evidence of it, and it's by the continued strong investigative work. And just more recently, it's indicated by the great work our members are doing now, being out in the public and being visible, being positive, and doing what they can in the community to be positive and show that we're still there. As far as our personnel goes, we do have one member who's been away on quite a long-term sick leave. Our commander position is still vacant, hopefully to be filled sometime soon. And we did have a corporal supervisor move on in late December, so we're still waiting to fill that position too. So we've got some members in acting roles. We have members doing supervisory roles. So I think it's a credit again to our constables on the street and our detachment members that even without all of the leadership roles filled, everyone's doing their jobs exceptionally well, and our detachment functions haven't been changed by being short a few people. Moving on to some noteworthy events this year, and there were a lot. I just tried to capture a few here. One of the charges that we were probably most happy about was it's just bike thefts. I know it's not a big person's crime or anything, but we recovered over 30 bikes in one investigation, and they were all stolen either from the Canmore area or at least the Bull Valley area. Multiple charges were laid on one fella. He was storing bikes in a U-Haul. We found a storage area in Calgary that our members went into and recovered more bikes from the Canmore area. And this person also was involved in credit card use, fraudulent credit card use, and using data. And this is an example, as I go back to my comment earlier, it's organized crime. It may not be related right to drug possession or trafficking, but it takes more than one person to be able to do so much. So that was a credit to our members involved in that file. We've laid charges in numerous other property crimes, not quite in the town of Canmore, but we had a real problem with trailheads, thefts from trailheads in the spring and in the fall. And we were able to identify suspects in that and lay some charges. I put in here that a lot of our crimes are being solved utilizing surveillance footage. The footage is becoming very good, high quality, and more organizations are using it effectively, and it really helps us to identify people involved. When we get good footage, we can send it out to our local media. We send it to our intelligence people in the district, and there's a really high instance of solving these crimes when we can get good footage. So we really appreciate the organizations who are taking efforts to protect themselves by doing that. One specific incident we had in September I thought I'd bring up to show that the members are out there. We had a couple of alarms go off in quick succession to each other by the shops of Canmore. Members were on the scene quickly, and another member who was in the area actually just came right upon the suspects as they were leaving the scene, so he made an arrest right on the spot. And I bring that up because it's just such again, good police work, and it's good to tell everybody that during the nights our members are out there and they're keeping track. When most people are sleeping, they're still keeping the community safe, and there's a lot of incidents similar to that. Not quite such a good thing to talk about, but there was an arrest made in a child pornography case, and that showed the good interaction between a number of police units, Canmore RCMP, and a number of units out of Calgary, and it should let the community know again that there's really good investigative work being done out there by more than just the Canmore detachment, and the support we have from all of our units. And when things are happening, that there is detection out there, and we're able to deal with it. I didn't mention a lot about persons crime in this report. We've, unfortunately that is still there. I believe our numbers dropped a little bit in domestic violence, and we did talk about this at the same time last year, how we had quite a spike. And I wasn't sure that was a pattern. I think that might have been just more of called a bad year or whatever you want, but I think the numbers have limited or gone down a little bit. Still a concern for us, but I think those are in line. Most of the numbers are in line with what's happening across the district and the province. I can open it up for any questions anyone has at this time.
Thank you very much. I have one or two. The first is more of just curiosity. So you noted in crime reduction, organized crime, the drug files were down significantly, which is not surprising given the legalization of cannabis. It's good to hear. I don't know if there's a direct link. I'm just asking if there's a direct link to the fact that you're able to reduce the efforts under the drug enforcement. And so is it because of that we're seeing the enhanced shifts that are being used specifically for traffic safety initiatives? Is there a link between those two facts?
They could be a little bit. I think we just wanted to change gears a little bit. I think the same system's been used for a number of years. We can become predictable, and we wanted to make sure we were showing results for these shifts as well. So I don't know if it's a direct link, and I will say that we know that there's still there's drug crime in town. There's trafficking going on. There's all kinds of drugs being trafficked and used. We switched some of the focus. We didn't go all in on the traffic, but we switched some of the focus to traffic to see if a combination of traffic patrols and, say, the downtown walks and the foot patrols in some higher crime areas, we want to mix it all together. So there could be a small correlation there, but we're not naive enough to think that the drug issue is still there and there's all kinds of drugs being dealt.
Okay. The other question I have is just around the detachment commander position, and you mentioned that it's still not filled. What part of the process, what's happening in that?
Well, I don't know how to answer this, but I'd be the one the most out of the loop. That'd be a question for our district management or anyone else. There's a process in place, and it's dealt with by our national promotions unit. And I don't know any more than anyone else.
Okay.
We just wait and see. And I do believe that this latest crisis we're in has probably put everything on hold again when it comes to promotions or transfers. So I'm sorry, I don't have the answers for that.
Well, in the meantime, I mean, we're really well served by yourself, so I'm certainly not unhappy with the current situation. It just would be nice to have it resolved, of course.
I agree, and thank you for your comments.
Other questions, Councillor Comfort?
Yeah, I was just wondering in regards to domestic violence, are there any programs that you're aware of that are run in the community, either through FCSS or another agency, that help with rehabilitating offenders and victims?
There's lots of assistance for victims. We're really well served here in the Valley between Victim Services, the YWCA, and the community programs. As far as rehabilitation for the offenders, I'm not even sure what programs are in place. After the court process, there's obviously there could be a peace bond or there could be probationary measures. We're not really in the loop of the you call it counseling or assistance that offenders get after. That's dealt with more by the provincial side of it. I know there are some good programs in place. I don't know exactly what is utilized in the community or how much it is used.
Okay, are there other questions for Councillor Seeley?
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you for the presentation. And congratulations. I was very happy to read that your bike theft arrest and those bikes being recovered and returned to their owners. I'm sure they're very happy to get them back. The question I have is under statistics, stolen goods and fraud are both up quite significantly. What do you attribute that to?
Well, when you talk about frauds, I just think that's a growing trend. Unfortunately, we're even seeing frauds tied in with the COVID-19 crisis. People are sending emails, and people will take advantage of any scenario. And I think that you're just going to see more and more. And I don't think that their success rate is high, but they're still finding people who will send money or they will send gift cards or. I think it's just a trend that's going to keep on going as the use of technology increases. You're going to see more frauds, and definitely the use of credit cards and credit card data. People are they're getting very good at manipulating numbers and taking the numbers and using them and knowing where the limits are and just managing that information very well.
I guess it's something business needs to pay attention to then, more so than ever.
They need to, and just all of us need to protect ourselves when it comes to any type of electronic fraud or emails or phone calls, anything. We all just have to be aware, and we have to keep encouraging everyone to be really aware of who they're talking to, who they're communicating with, and to, if you don't initiate the conversation, then really double check where the communication is coming from and why you're getting it.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions at this time, thank you very much for being with us again today, sir. And we will move on to Mr. Burt, the Bylaw Services Annual Report.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody. I wanted to echo your comments, Mayor Borman, for thanking for Sergeant Andronic to continue to do double duty for a significant amount of time while we go through the recruitment process. I don't have any further updates for you on that. I can assure you that I'm in regular contact with staffing with the RCMP. I think they're actually getting tired of the regular emails that I'm sending them, looking for an update. So it is something that's humming along in the background. But again, really want to commend Sergeant Andronic and his team for the work that they're doing in the community.
Great.
So I'm going to provide a brief update on the 2019 Bylaw Services activities and photo radar. This is going to be a nice 5 to 10 minute break for me from COVID. Looking forward to this. So 2019 really was both a challenging and exciting year for the Bylaw Services team. We saw a significant turnover in staffing throughout the year. And what I saw throughout the year and really kind of mid-season on is just being so proud of all the great work that the team accomplished. Some things that I noted for highlights were a new renewed focus on customer service. So I felt like that had shifted throughout the year. More positive comments received, really respecting that when people are calling for service, we're treating them as a customer. Working with various partners throughout the year and conducting daily patrols to understand and address the overnight parking challenge in the community. And there was a significant amount of time spent working with various agencies, understanding the needs of the community, doing some outreach work, and then having to transition from the outreach into an enforcement and education component. Taking on the proactively dealing with the fruit trees and wildlife attractants. You heard me speak back in the fall about that. Again, really proud about the work that the team did on that. We had one officer who was leading that up. I recently received a report on how we're going to enhance that moving into the 2020 season. And then creating a new vision for the department. It took a bit of work to get to, but it's included in the report, and the team came up with Canmore Bylaw Services is a team that engages with residents and visitors to provide a safe and livable community. We do this by providing a high level of service, proactively identifying and responding to community requests for service, taking an educational-based approach through enforcement bylaws approved by Town Council, positive community interactions, and partnering with internal and external agencies. It took a bit of time to get there, but it really set the tone for the team moving forward and thinking about positive community interactions even as of late. Our officers are out, like Ms. DeZoto said, on weekends and during the week to focus on showing a presence in the community. And overall, the general observations have been quite good. And feedback I'm hearing from the officers is there's more thumbs up and thank yous going on in the community towards our community peace officers than has been received in the past. So they're really appreciating being out there and hearing those positive kudos. So looking into the statistics from 2019, our investigations, which include calls for service and proactive investigations, are pretty much consistent with 2018. However, we did this with significantly fewer staff. So interesting seeing how hard the team worked throughout the year. As you can see in the investigation by category pie graph on page 12, 60% of our work, or 61%, relates to parking, traffic, and road issues, such as park longer than 72 hours, expired license plates, unattached trailers, parking complaints, etc. So that's part of the bread and the butter of the work we do in the community. And I would suspect that that will remain consistent as we move forward. Shifting to warnings and tickets, they were down in 2019 compared to the last year. And I attribute that as a result of the staff turnover. I did want to highlight, though, there was still a significant or a considerable amount of warnings and tickets issued for dog at large. Photo radar, it's down here. We saw a 19% decrease in violations in 2019 from 2018. And there was a split. 38% of the time is spent or was spent in playground zones, with 62% spent in all other speed zones. I did want to just put a reminder out that photo radar is used in conjunction with traditional traffic enforcement conducted by the RCMP. And as Sergeant Andronic noted, there was a significant number of tickets issued. Looking through his report, 3,000 last year. So this isn't a replacement for conventional enforcement. Net revenues from the program funded several policing and traffic safety initiatives, contracted costs for 1.5 RCMP officers, so a savings to taxpayers. 1 car seat clinic was funded, 43 new driver rebate programs, and various active transportation projects. I do want to highlight that there's a new requirement set out by the government of Alberta coming out of the photo radar review to submit and post an annual report on the municipality's website. This was just posted last week on the town's website on the canmore.ca photo radar page. There is more information contained in that report if you have any questions about that, or if you want to direct any of the constituents that have questions about photo radar. That takes me to the end of my formal presentation. I look forward to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burt. I really appreciate the work you've done to change the public face of the bylaw department, and I really agree with you. It's been very effective. I certainly see bylaw out and about quite often, and they appear to me to be engaging in a really positive and friendly manner. So, and that, I know that's been a very specific piece of work you've been doing this past year to reshape that department, and I think you've done a very good job of it. Thank you. Councillor Comfort. Councillor Comfort.
There, I just have a very slow mouth, sticky.
Slow mouse? Did you say slow mouth or slow mouse?
Slow mouth, not a mouth. Anyway, I just had a question about there were 66 taxi investigations. And I just wondered what was, if you had to characterize those with one word or a couple words, what would those be?
The majority of those are new vehicle inspections.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions from members of council? Members of council? Seeing none, I'm going to move along because I'm keeping my eye on the clock and we have a hard stop here. Thanks very much, Mr. Burt, for being here today. I always appreciate the reports you bring. Moving on then to Chief Gowler, the Fire Rescue Annual Report for 2019. There he is.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes and respecting your schedule. I'll try to trim down my usual soliloquy. I do want to start briefly with acknowledging Staff Sergeant Androniak's stand and his loss within his agency. And I'd like to build on that a little bit. We've been able to build a fabulous relationship with our RCMP detachment and all staff. And I'd like to extend that to Bylaw as well. We feel that we're building a really strong first response team here, and there's a lot of cross relationships between all three services, and of course AHS as well from the medic side. So I'd just like to thank Stan for all his fellowship and the fact that the agencies are probably close together as they've ever been. With that said, just moving on to a really high-level overview of our report. I know you have it in front of you, pages 15 to 18, I believe. Just some mountaintops, and then I'd like to discuss a couple of interesting projects that happened last year. In a nutshell, it's no real surprise, but call volume was up over last year, but not by a ridiculous amount. We seem to have this big zigzag year over year, but we're definitely trending upwards on calls, and it's fairly easily directly relatable back to population and visitation to the community. Our fires themselves were not really out of line. We see a little uptick on appliance and cooking fires, actually, and that's an area we're going to focus a little bit throughout the summer and fall this year in reaction to those statistics we see there on page 2. Medicals, they're a steady part of our business. It is the part of our business right now that is still maintaining quite steady, quite at a normal rate, as a matter of fact. One statistic that I was pleased to see is that our alarms called to population ratio is dropping. So you'll notice on page 17, year over year, our population is increasing and the alarms are increasing with it. And I noticed last year in 2019, we've seen a reduction in just general alarms, and the layperson refers to them as false alarms or, accidental triggers, dust, smokes, etc. I noticed those are trending downwards a little bit, and we're seeing that into Q1 of 2020 as well. That's a positive sign. I'd like to take all credit for it, but I can't. I can't tell you exactly why. I think partly education, partly monitoring, relationships with our development committee and our condo boards. Regardless, it's a really positive trend, that one. I did address the statistics around the medicals. I'll let them speak for themselves, but I think we're running around 90% ALS capable. And I think the usual statistics that, Councillor, I see you, are asked for should be there, but of course, happy to have questions on that when we get there. Just stepping on to the highlights, really, again, high level. Last year was our rollout of the peak staffing program. It was very successful. I reported on it on a different session. I will return to that at the very end. We have been with Calgary Dispatch System now since February, and I can just say unequivocally that it has been a great move. Both service levels, professionalism, technical capability, and actually budgetary. It was a better value for money by a long stretch. And we're very comfortable with the strength that that organization brings to us. And I really feel it now in this COVID situation. We have direct and immediate contact with virtually the epicenter of the province on this issue. So that's been great. So dispatch is great. Our new engine, I'm sure you've seen it around town, is in service and working very well. We feel we got good value for money. You're looking at a 25-year truck there. I'm pretty confident it's going to go the distance. Records management system came online last year by the company ICO. That has been fabulous, and it couldn't be timed any better. We do all of our records reviews and approvals. Carrie and I, Deputy Chief Martins and myself do those, but we do them virtually because it's cloud-based. So we can do it from home, offsite, tablet form, whatever. So the data is secure and available via the web, which is fantastic. Fire Smart program, we caught, pardon the pun, caught fire last year. A lot of interest around that program. As soon as it dries up, and folks, I'm told that it will eventually, we will really re-engage with that piece. And which brings us to our sprinkler protection unit, which again, we just really want to thank Council for the support on that piece of equipment. It is fully serviced and in service. And in fact, you're going to see some training weekend after next with appropriate social distancing and all the safeguards in place. We want to make sure that piece of equipment is trained and ready to roll as of the end of the month, the start of next month. We will coordinate with Robin and our communications team just so the community knows what we're doing and where on that. So all that equipment's ready to go, and we're really pleased with that. So all in all, feel really pleased with 2019. I think we had a few wins in there. We learned a few lessons along the way. And, a big shout out to the entire team, right from their community firefighters, our paid responders, right to the full-time folks. Everybody's really playing their roles well. I'm frankly honored to be associated with this department in this town. It's brilliant, it really is. And then just to close out with a few comments about the fire department, how we're doing. What I'm really pleased to report is the staff is healthy. We do not have anyone on sick. We don't have anyone on quarantine right now. And we're really working hard to keep it that way. We're not sure we're going to get to the end of this with that statistic, but in about, I'd say 5 months, I'd love to report that to you. We've got a lot of measures in place, and some were supported by Council, certainly to keep our folks safe and healthy, so they're there when you need them. Operations are ongoing. You won't see any service change or delivery changes as we're going along. Happy to say that. And as I mentioned, we'll be training with the structural protection unit in a couple of weeks. And just to close out the peak staffing piece that we've adjusted, that we've started about 2 weeks ago now with 3 and 3, we're seeing that to great effect. And I'd like to just point to a house fire, a structure fire that came in about 3 days ago. It was a kitchen fire. The good news was it was kept to the kitchen, which is great, to the oven specifically. But we were able to get into Stewart Creek in under 10 minutes, right from start to finish. And that was really, really brilliant. And just a few hours ago, we had a general page for just alarms ringing. And now in this protocol, we just send the truck on its own to investigate immediately. So they left in 90 seconds, they were on scene in 2 or 3 minutes. resolved the issue. We didn't have to tap into our community firefighters. It's more cost effective and a lot faster service for the public. So that worked really well. So the desired effect of that program is happening, and I just want to thank you for that support in that. And that is fire in a nutshell. I know you have a long day, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any, and I leave it with you.
Thanks very much, Chief. I have just one question, really. In your note on the Fire Smart and Wildland urban interface activities, specifically the home assessments, I'm curious if you know how many home assessments were actually conducted this past year.
No.
Okay.
That's a brilliant question, sir, and I should have had that one in my back pocket.
I should have prepared you, but would you say it was slim or meaningful?
I would say somewhere in between. I wouldn't say slim for sure. DC Martins would be he's over there, much better prepared to answer that. But I'm going to get that number to you.
Sure.
We feel it was better than slim, but it's an area we would really like to expand on, and we feel we're going to have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I really think it's important. So it'd be interesting to know how many assessments we did.
Yes, sir.
Councillor Comfort, you have a question? Councillor
Yeah.
Comfort?
So my question is, are you going to be doing any special training regarding, distancing for fighting an actual fire as a first responder? Or are there different tactics you would use like that? Is that going to change your protocols in training?
For the structure, just generally speaking, or for the structure protection unit?
For anyone going out to attack a fire, for example, if you know that you have to, with the personal protection equipment that you issued at a fire, is that sufficient to protect you against transmission of disease?
Great question. Thank you. Sorry, it took me a minute to get that. Yes, over the last 5 weeks, we've issued, I've forgotten, 6 operational update bulletins and really beefed up our personal protective equipment, made sure we have more than enough supply. And we have instituted procedures within our operation so people can respond effectively and efficiently with very little service change and still be fully protected. Yes. We feel we're quite well equipped in that area. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Mayor Borman. And thank you, Chief, for your presentation. So I 3 shout outs based on your report. One, that's amazing that we are 90.5% ALS capable in 2019. That's really excellent. And 2, shout out to Deputy Chief Martins about being accepted into the Executive Leadership Program for Fire Chiefs, and for her re-election to the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. So my question then is, I noted in your report that Canmore Fire Rescue was on scene first 33% of the time in 2019. How does that compare to 2018?
It is within about 2 percentage points.
Okay.
I can send you the exact number, but it's between 1 or 2 percentage points. We've been very consistent in the last number of years in normal circumstances, being roughly 30-odd% there first. That goes back
a while. I think that number's gotten a little bit better though over the years, over the last 5 years, perhaps.
By a point or 2, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That was all my question. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Are there other questions from council? Seeing none, I will add my kudos as well to Deputy Chief Martins for her those 2 successes in her professional career. So please pass that along. And
absolutely, yeah, we're tickled about that, and I'll make sure that gets crossed. Yeah.
Excellent. Moving on now to item E1, council updates, and we're going to go through that report in lightning speed. Are there any questions at all? Seeing none, we'll move on to item Councillor McCallum.
I just wanted to add that I looked at my report, and the last pointed item on page 19, it says 30% of community housing tenants were not able to pay their full rent for April 2020. And I wanted to clarify that that was due to COVID-19 and their job losses And I did not do that in my report, so my apologies.
Great. Yeah, I'd certainly assume that, so thank you. Moving on then to item F1, the service area reports. Also, we'll move very quickly through this. Some of the questions I had were actually answered by some of the earlier presenters. The questions, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. On page 26, item G of the Community Social Development Report, they talk about the call center being open 7 days per week and that they're looking at bringing back those hours based on less call volume. Do we know, would people when they call, clearly haven't called, will they be deferred to 211 service after hours or on weekends? Is that how that works?
I don't think so. The 211 service is always available. So if they call after hours, they just get a message. They can leave a message and then the call will be followed up on the next business day.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I have one very quick question. The RFP for design services closes on April 23rd. That's for the Palliser Fire Hall. Just curious how many businesses responded, and that information can come later if nobody has it off the top of their head.
I don't believe it's closed yet.
No, April 23rd it said.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if their response is good, or you don't know.
We'll get them on the 23rd typically.
Okay. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. On page 33, item F of the Public Works Report, we're talking about Wapiti Municipal Campground. I note that negotiation has happened, and oh, excuse my cat, sorry. That we've received, they've made available 3 parking stalls to support the Safe Park program. I thought we were looking for a higher number of stalls with that negotiation, like closer to 10.
Well, and since this service area report was submitted, that Safe Park program is being revisited, so.
Yes, I understand.
So.
But even at the time when it wasn't being revisited, they still weren't able to get any more than 3?
No, not under this negotiation.
Okay, thank you very much.
No other questions in regards to the service area reports? Seeing none, moving on to the council resolution list. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I believe that brings us to the end of the agenda. I'll move the committee of the whole be adjourned. Those in favor? Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. We have 7 minutes before we will call to order the special meeting of council.